Hi, good evening, everyone. Beta, welcome to the new chapter that we want to start today. This is risk and incentive in contracting. We are going to go ahead and we are going to talk about two aspects in this chapter. The first aspect that I want to focus on in this chapter, as the name suggests, is the risk aspect, right? Risk aspect. When we talk about risk aspect, actually you will notice that most of this you have already done in microeconomics uncertainty chapter. We have already taken care of this aspect much before. We've already talked about what is a risk neutral individual, what is a risk lover individual. So I'm not going to take this aspect in a lot of detail, right? I'm going to just quickly brush up things with you. We have already done what is arrow Pratt formula. ये सब हमने किया है microeconomics में, right? But the second aspect is what is interesting here, where we are going to go ahead and talk about the incentives. Right. So when we talk about incentives here, this is what will be very interesting. And slowly you will also learn something about what is called as the principal agent problem. इसके बारे में भी सीखोगे, है ना? And you will try to see how game theory can be applied to the principal agent problem. So this is a very interesting aspect and we will be going ahead and we will be focusing on this aspect also. Okay, so to begin with, let me give you one example of what is risk and where risk is involved. So risk is involved wherever we go ahead and wherever we talk about the presence of random outcomes. The presence of random outcomes. Just say if I toss a coin, when I will toss a coin, I can either get head or tails. So there is presence of randomness involved, right? There is presence of probability involved. Probability is involved. So whenever we see presence of randomness, presence of probability, that is basically what is your risk. Okay? That is basically what is your uncertainty. Okay? So any payoff function which captures these preferences over random outcomes is what we want to deal with now. अब हमें इन चीजों से डील करना है. तो एक बार जरा ध्यान से देखो. You have seen a game tree like this before also. ये पहली बारी हम game tree नहीं देख रहे हैं. But अब क्या हो रहा है? अब यहाँ पे हमने एक open circle बनाया है. And we know that whenever we go ahead and we represent an open circle is always representative of what is called as a chance node. इसको क्या बोल दिया जाता है? Chance node. And what is a chance node? A chance node is anything where you have involvement of probabilities. Okay. So what we are going ahead and we are saying is that, you can either go to outcome A and receive $950 with certainty. With certainty. With certainty. Or you can go to B where there is a chance node available. माने जहां पे कुछ probabilities assumed होंगी, where you are playing a lottery. And when you play a lottery, it can either give you head or tail. The probability of head is also half and the probability of tail is also half. If it is head, you will receive $2,000 and if it is tail, you will receive $0. Okay. So here there is a chance node involved. Chance node माने probability है and this is coming with certainty $950. Now what we are also going ahead and assuming is that the more the money we have, the more the utility. माने अगर मेरे को 0 मिल रहे हैं उसका यूटिलिटी सबसे कम है, अगर मेरे को 950 मिल रहे हैं उसका यूटिलिटी ज्यादा है, अगर मुझे 2000 मिल रहे हैं उसका यूटिलिटी और ज्यादा है. So we are not assuming diminishing utility here. We are assuming increasing utility. जितना ज्यादा पैसा उतना ज्यादा utility. Right? Now let us try to think about, एक मिनट के लिए इसको भूल जाओ. Let us try to think about any utility function which satisfies this kind of preferences. ऐसा कौन सा यूटिलिटी फंक्शन होगा जो ऐसी प्रेफरेंसेस को सेटिस्फाई करे, जिसमें हमें ये दिखे कि जैसे जैसे पैसा बढ़ रहा है, एज मनी इज इंक्रीजिंग द यूटिलिटी इज ऑल्सो इंक्रीजिंग. One such example of a utility function can be Vx is equal to x. When we have Vx is equal to x, तो देखो, what will be the utility when money is 0? Instead of x, you will put 0, so 0. Utility from 950 हो जाएगा 950, and utility from 2000 हो जाएगा 2000. So we are seeing that as money is increasing, the utility that you are getting is also increasing. जो utility आपको मिल रहा है वो भी बढ़ रहा है जैसे जैसे पैसा बढ़ रहा है, as money is increasing, right? Another such utility function which can go ahead and satisfy the preferences is also x by 1000. इसमें भी ठीक रहेगा. So if you have x by 1000 defined as your utility function, तो utility from 0 will be 0 by 1000. Utility from 950 will be 950 by 1000. That means it will be 0.95. And utility from 2000 will be 2000 by 1000. That means 2. So यहाँ पे भी हमें यही दिख रहा है. We can go ahead and we can clearly see here that as the money is increasing, the utility that we are going ahead and we are getting 0.95 and 2, utility भी बढ़ रहा है. Utility is also increasing. Another such utility function which can satisfy can be root x. ठीक है, तो माने इससे बहुत सारे यूटिलिटी फंक्शंस हो सकते हैं. रूट एक्स को भी यू कैन गो एहेड एंड चेक, आपको यही आंसर मिलेगा दैट एज मनी इज इंक्रीजिंग यूटिलिटी इज इंक्रीजिंग. सो एनी इंक्रीजिंग फंक्शन ऑफ एक्स, जो भी इंक्रीजिंग फंक्शन होगा एक्स का, माने एनी फंक्शन विच हैज v डैश एक्स ग्रेटर देन 0, जैसे जैसे x बढ़ेगा यूटिलिटी बढ़ेगा. एनी इंक्रीजिंग फंक्शन ऑफ x, इट विल सैटिस्फाई दिस प्रॉपर्टी. वहां पे ये चीज सैटिस्फाई होगी दैट एज यू पुट अ बिगर एंड बिगर नंबर, जैसे जैसे आप एक बड़ा बड़ा नंबर डालते जाओगे, उसके जो कॉरेस्पॉन्डिंग यूटिलिटी मिलता जाएगा वो भी बढ़ता जाएगा. दैट विल ऑल्सो इंक्रीज, राइट? नाउ one issue or one thing that we have to try and understand in case of in case of this kind of preference is that we are not always interested in understanding the payoff. बहुत बारी हमें इससे मतलब नहीं होता कि हमें पे ऑफ कितना मिल रहा है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, अगर यहाँ पे सपोज आई वुड हैव सेड दैट द पे ऑफ इज 1000, आई एम रिसीविंग 1000, तो वी वुड हैव सीन दैट आउटकम नंबर बी, अगर मैं इसका एक्सपेक्टेड पे ऑफ निकालती हूँ, इफ आई गो अहेड एंड आई फाइंड आउट द एक्सपेक्टेड पे ऑफ, the expected payoff will come out with probability half I am getting 2000, and with probability half I am getting 0. That means the expected payoff will be 1000. And here also I am receiving, यहाँ पे भी इसका जो payoff रहेगा that will also be 1000. So in economics we are not always interested in the payoff, क्योंकि payoff कभी कभी लॉटरी का और नॉन लॉटरी का सेम हो सकता है. The expected payoff of lottery and non-lottery can be same. So what we are interested in understanding is rather expected utility. So we are not interested in understanding just the expected payoff. Payoff बराबर भी हो सकता है, but we are interested in understanding or computing expected utility. क्यों expected utility? Because this can differ. Depending on the type of consumer. Expected utility इस पे डिपेंड करेगा कि what kind of consumer I am talking about. Am I talking about a consumer who is risk averse, risk neutral, or risk lover? So even though, suppose if I tell you that suppose with lottery and without lottery, suppose payoff same है, expected payoff is the same. So there can still be a case that individual A who is risk averse, he will prefer non-lottery. Individual B who is risk neutral, he will be indifferent. And individual C who is risk lover, he will prefer lottery. Although the expected payoff is the same, they will prefer different outcomes. वो अलग अलग outcomes को इसलिए prefer करेंगे because at the end of the day we need to understand that their utility functions are different. तीनों का ही जो utility function होगा, the utility functions that they will be having, it will be very different, right? So therefore what is important here to understand is that we are okay, expected payoff तो important है, but we are also under the, you know, we also want to go ahead and understand what will be expected utility function, because that will be dependent on what kind of consumer we are talking about, किस तरीके का हमारा consumer है. Now, you know, there are many kind of consumers, as we know. Let's talk about the risk averse kind of consumer. So risk averse individual is that kind of individual who goes ahead and gets the same payoff from two things. तो एक हमारा outcome है with lottery and एक है without lottery. And both have same expected payoff. माने यहाँ पे भी with lottery also on an average you are getting same amount, and without lottery also on an average you are getting the same amount. But a risk averse individual is who will prefer the one which is without lottery. उसका utility function जो without lottery से होगा, utility जो उसको मिलेगा, that utility will be more than his expected utility from with lottery. Although the expected payoff in the both cases is the same. So risk averse individual is any individual who prefers a certain monetary payment rather than playing lottery with the same expected payoff. Expected payoff the same hai, but his preference is to go without lottery. Whereas when we talk about a risk neutral kind of individual, he is indifferent between lottery and non-lottery. And when we talk about a risk lover kind of individual, जब हम एक risk lover की बात करते हैं, so this risk lover, he will prefer playing a lottery. He will prefer playing a lottery. Now, the more the risk aversion, देखो, again, this is what you have done in uncertainty chapter, हाँ? हमने ये risk chapter में अच्छे से we have done this in microeconomics itself. So we know that when we talk about a risk lover individual, his indifference curves or utility function, they are convex. For a risk neutral individual, we have seen that the utility functions are linear. And for a risk averse individual, we know that the utility function is concave. The utility function is concave. ये हमें बात पता है. He prefers certain amount to uncertain amount. और ऐसा क्यों हो रहा था? We had seen that when we were going ahead, suppose यहाँ पे suppose let's take the same example. Suppose there are two options with lottery. With probability half, you are getting 0. With probability half, you are getting 2000. तो यहाँ पे हमारा 2000 है. Here I have 0. I am joining these 2 points. And the expected payoff is coming out to be 1000. So I'm drawing 1000 here. Right? This point, this is telling me utility with certain 1000. अगर 1000 rupees मुझे certainly मिल रहे हैं. The point on the utility curve tells you the amount that you get with certainty, हमेशा. So this is, अगर मैं utility के curve पर हूँ, if I am on the curve, it is telling me that I am getting this 1000 rupees with certainty, right? Whereas this point, which is on the line, which is a weighted average point, this is giving me expected utility. This is giving me expected utility. तो ये point मुझे बोलता है कि what is my expected utility from same 1000 rupees. माने this is when I play lottery. And this is when I don't play lottery. When I get the amount with certainty. So you see, utility from not playing lottery is much more than utility from playing lottery. You can see this. So money, the concave indifference utility functions are basically showing what? They are basically going ahead and they are basically showing those curves when you have risk averse individual. Now we are going ahead and saying that the more the risk aversion, the more concave the utility function. ठीक है, तो basically क्या है? If I have very concave utility function, मतलब more risk aversion, धीरे धीरे जैसे जैसे concavity कम होती जा रही है, if it is going towards a straight line, so that means you are going towards becoming risk neutral. And अगर आपका धीरे धीरे convex होता जा रहा है, you are going towards becoming a risk lower. So the more concave the utility function, जितना ज्यादा concave होगा, the more would be your risk aversion, right? This is what we are going ahead and what we are mentioning here. The more risk aversion, the more concave the utility function. So here I have gone ahead and I have shown this through this graph also. ये देखो, this is a straight line. That means no concavity. So risk neutral. You see this? This is slightly concave. देखो. So less risk aversion. And you see this? This is very concave. So greater risk aversion. Okay. Now we can also go ahead and we can also measure risk aversion through the Arrow-Pratt measure of risk aversion. Again, something which all of us have done in the uncertainty chapter. हमने इसको बहुत डिटेल में microeconomics uncertainty chapter में we have gone ahead and we have done this part, right? So the Arrow-Pratt measure of risk aversion basically goes ahead and measures the degree of risk aversion. ये जितना ज्यादा होगा उतना ज्यादा एक individual risk averse होगा. What you can go ahead and do is check it with a utility function. So suppose I take this utility function x to the power alpha. तो formula क्या कहता है? The formula is minus x v double dash x upon v dash x. My utility function is x to the power alpha. My utility function is x to the power alpha. So what will be v dash x beta? Alpha x to the power alpha minus 1. And what will be v double dash x beta? Again, power will come down and power will reduce by 1. Right? If I just put all these values here, so I will get minus x, v double dash x का ये value आएगा, alpha, alpha minus 1, x to the power alpha minus 2 upon v dash x का value will be alpha, x to the power alpha minus 1. This will cancel out, right? When power is same, when base is same, power will be added. So this will give you minus alpha minus 1, x to the power alpha minus 1 upon x to the power alpha minus 1. This will give you 1 minus alpha, right? So basically हमारा जो Arrow-Pratt का value आ जाएगा, that will be coming out as 1 minus alpha. It will come out as 1 minus alpha, right? Now, once it comes out as 1 minus alpha, so there is something which is very interesting here. देखो, 1 minus alpha will be positive as long as alpha is less than 1. 1 minus alpha will be positive as long as alpha is less than 1. And अगर ये positive है, what is the interpretation out of it? The interpretation is that there is positive risk aversion. Positive risk aversion means I am positively against risk. I want to avoid risk, right? I want to avoid risk. So positive risk aversion matlab the individual is risk averse. The individual is risk averse. So in this case, when alpha will be less than 1, it means individual will be risk averse. अगर ये 0 हो जाता है, that means there is no risk aversion. तो मतलब individual is risk neutral. So when 1 minus alpha is 0, it means alpha is 1. It means that individual is risk neutral. And when alpha is greater than 1, so 1 minus alpha will be negative. Means negative risk aversion. I am not risk averse. It means that I am risk lover. So alpha less than 1, risk averse. Alpha equal to 1, risk neutral. Alpha greater than 1, risk lover. individual. Is this clear? So this is basically how you can link the value of alpha. कैसे आप alpha को link कर सकते हो risk aversion से. So you will notice that as alpha will become smaller. जैसे कि for example 1 minus alpha में if alpha is 0.5, so the amount of risk aversion will be 0.5. 1 minus 0.5, 0.5 हो जाएगा. And if alpha is 0.3, तो risk aversion will be 1 minus alpha माने 0.7. So as this alpha is decreasing, जैसे जैसे alpha कम होता जा रहा है, the amount of risk aversion is increasing. So as alpha is getting closer to zero, जैसे जैसे alpha कम होता जा रहा है, as alpha is becoming closer and closer to zero, we can go ahead and see that the amount of risk aversion is increasing. I hope that this part is absolutely clear to you.